Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. We're here in our bunkers waiting for World War III.
Yeah, as usual, we have to think about what war can we help stop today, since we haven't stopped very many. Even back a couple 20 years ago, when we thought finally they got wise and surrendered and we left these countries, it turns out that we're still there, whether it's Afghanistan or Libya or Syria, we're still around, even though, we brought our troops home. It's all lying about what war is all about, and that's why we work hard on trying to get an explanation out so that people understand what they're doing to us and how they're undermining our protection, because they're always doing it to make us safe and secure. And of course, we know that we're less safe because of this. People don't like us interfering in the internal affairs of other nations. But we want to start off with an article that was in antiwar.com today, and it says U.S. considers launching airstrikes against Iran to support Israeli attack. Wow, that sounds like it could be escalating, even though we've been doing stuff like that. But this is a little bit worse because it's always retaliation, and usually it's ratcheted up. They don't just back down. They may pause for a day or two to try to keep people off balance, but we know this keeps coming. And I think really the thing I feel like we're talking about today, Daniel, is the fact that we're trying to figure out who gives permission and who's the boss in Israel, and who runs the United States government. So and a lot of times the names that appear aren't the ones really running the show. But today, though, they're considering bombing as another retaliation, which I think is very, very dangerous and but likely to occur. But there's a little bit of confusion, about who's making the final decision in Iran, and I think the same thing in America, which makes this even more dangerous. Who really is in charge? I wish we could have a say so in our policy, because we wouldn't have these dilemmas. We just wouldn't be involved in these entangling wars that are constant, bankrupting our country and really making us much more endangered.
Yeah, it's hard. I'm sorry, just going to say it's hard to imagine this kind of a massive escalation. The idea that the U.S. would be actively bombing Iran, which, by the way, is a country that has not threatened us, has not attacked us. Therefore, there is no justifiable rationale for the U.S. to directly bomb Iran. But nevertheless, according to, and Dave DeCamp wrote it up, but it's according to an NBC News article that came out saying that unnamed administration sources are considering the possibility of U.S. directly bombing Iran. And now our viewers should they well know this, Dr. Paul, but Iran is no Iraq. Iran is no, Grenada. Iran is a massive country with a massive population, a very high-tech country. Starting a war with Iran is basically like starting a war with Iraq and Afghanistan times 100. The U.S. currently has 40,000 troops in the region, most of them within the reach of an Iranian retaliation. Does the United States government really want to put 40,000 U.S. men and women in service? Do they want to put them up and hold them hostage so that we can continue to backstop Israel's rampage throughout the region? I mean, Dr. Paul, if this were a few years ago, I could imagine you and Dennis Kucinich and Walter Jones and a good handful of people across the spectrum would be down on the floor saying, what the heck is going on? Even in introducing impeachment, if you do this. But what we hear now is nothing. Everyone is just slumbering and sleepwalking.
Right. So, but there was one quote from a U.S. Military official when they were talking about this, and he described it as very limited airstrikes. But there could be some limitation, short of using nuclear weapons, but very limited has a relative term to it. It's because little things get bigger. It's just the fact that they're doing it and the policy's wrong, and this thing keeps escalating. That is why even at the beginning, when I say, "Oh, we're not going to do anything, to provoke them, and we'll be very cautious, and we'll get approval," but I don't know. I think they're dancing. Even in Israel, they were having this little debate on who has the final saying, whether it would be Netanyahu or his defense minister. But I think right now they may be still trying to decide this. But their goal, it looks to me, Daniel, like the people that want the permission seen, they want it looks like, that our officials that run our country have approved of it. And I see that's why there's, pauses and questions asked, because why in the world are they doing that anyway? And who's really in charge? And some days, Daniel, I keep thinking, can we veto the demands of Israel? Can we veto the demands of Ukrainian leaders? Sometimes I don't think we even have a veto over how that money is spent.
This reminds me, Dr. Paul, of exactly how the neocons talk. Oh, it'll just be limited airstrikes. They hardly even notice, Oh, they will greet us as liberators when we attack Iran or Iraq. This is how they always talk, and they're always wrong. What would the United States do if Iran had limited airstrikes against, Washington and Dallas or something? Would it be say, okay, no harm, no foul, guys, we get your message? Of course not. We would consider ourselves in a state of war with Iran, and we would retaliate. That is exactly what Iran is going to do. Now, if we felt that our existence was threatened here in the United States by Iran, if they were about to attack us, then we'd be justified in doing that. But it is absolutely not the case. Now, as you point out, how this is going about is originally their defense minister Gallant was supposed to come and meet with Austin to discuss the potential Israeli retaliation against Iran, which retaliated against Israel for bombing Iran a while ago. That was called off because Netanyahu apparently wants to kick it upstairs and have a direct call with Biden, which literally may be happening as we speak. It shows, I think, that the issue is being kicked upstairs. I think the big question, Dr. Paul, is whether Israel will hit the nuclear reactor and the oil and gas sites in Iran. From the reports, Dr. Paul, President Biden would rather him not do that. And I can understand why, in a way, because we're in an election with just a couple of weeks away. And if you hit all of Iran's oil and gas supplies, you're going to have oil, you're going to have gasoline or $10-15 a gallon in the U.S. Not a good look when you're neck and neck with Trump. So it's a big question. It looks like the two of them are discussing it, or at least someone is sitting in for Biden. Who knows what, discussing it.
I keep wondering, you may have an opinion about it, about the relationship of Gallant with Netanyahu. I wonder if there are any real differences, or this is just covering their bases, and they say, well, it looks like we didn't tell them about the assassination as Nasrallah. Maybe we better be more open-minded. We better tell them when we're using their weapons and their money what we're really up to. But I was wondering if there is the slightest difference between these two Israelis.
They do, and apparently there's a lot of tension between Gallant and Netanyahu. So that could basically be cooked into it as well. In the U.S., at least according to press reports, and who knows how they can be trusted, but apparently the assassination of Nasrallah took place without the U.S. being forewarned, and Lloyd Austin, our Secretary of Defense, reportedly was furious about it. But of course, no one is furious with them enough to just say, okay, well, no more weapons, guys. You're doing stuff we don't want that's actually harming our interests in the region, so you're on your own. Knock yourselves out. No one wants to go that far, of course.
Yes, and then, one of Biden's argument is, well, we better be more cautious. He wants to be looking like one that's very thoughtful and thinking about all things. And yet he is saying, well, we better be careful. This war could expand. But he doesn't do much about it. He'll give you those warnings, and then he'll say, how much money do you need? What do you need to support you? Oh, yeah. And then he'll say, well, we'll have a big discussion. But we do know, at least is my opinion, that if there's any serious difference, opinion from our current leaders and the people in Israel, I think Israel's going to get their way. I think they've just proved it, and it's a very strong intimidation. Even some of the people in Congress, I think, sort of lean our way. When it comes to those votes, it's surprising how strong the votes are, and that is, not many people say, well, why don't we back off a little bit and think about this. Most of them, when it comes to, are we going to participate with the money and intelligence and the rest to do whatever is perceived in this country to be very, very strong support for Israel? And somebody said, well, what would I do about that? And I said, I'd remove would you stop sending stuff to Israel? No, I'd stop sending stuff to both of them and a lot of other people, enrich the Americans, and maybe we would take care of some of this problems that we have here in the United States when it comes to the problems that we face with COVID and the rest of the things, and hurricanes. So that's to me is the big thing. And so what the bottom line, though, is you hear people and we think they're coming our way, but then when the vote comes, it's hard to find strong supporters.
Yeah, I think what both Netanyahu and Zelensky of Ukraine want is the United States to fight their war for them, and they've both been maneuvering for that to happen for some time now, because both of them know that they cannot chew what they've bitten off. They cannot win the war that they have jumped into, and so their immediate default is, how do we ensnare the United States? It's like Brer Rabbit going into the briar patch or whatever. How can we ensnare the United States into these battles to fight them for us? And for those of us who actually are patriotic Americans, Dr. Paul, you know this very well, because the troops supported you more than any other candidate when you were in there. It certainly does not show respect for the troops. It doesn't show respect for the U.S. military. It doesn't show respect to the U.S. taxpayer for us to be involved fighting other people's wars. And as you always say, Dr. Paul, if you subsidize something, you're going to get more of it. If we're going to jump into everyone else's war, there's going to be a heck of a lot of more wars out there, and people getting on the phone calling us to come do battle until, as you would say, we're broke.
Yeah, and eventually, though, what they find out is the people get disgusted. It took so long. I think of the 60s so often. It took a long time for the opponents to the war spoke out loudly enough, and then they threatened the congressman to stop voting for the money, and they did. And it doesn't solve the problem of bad foreign policy, though. It sort of ends these things. And one of my arguments, and I believe you join me in this, is let's stop them from starting. Getting involved, because it is hard to stop these wars, because then you get accused of being not supporting the troops. You're un-American, and we have to make the world safe. And they're going to threaten us. They're all violent people coming here to destroy us. So this is the propaganda works to a large degree. And so that is the reason, Daniel, I think it's so important that we get our message out, that our policy would end up preventing these problems from coming, because that's a better way to do it than thinking you can stop them once they get rip-roaring after so much damage is done.
I think the one difference here, Dr. Paul, is I think the numbers are actually with us. I mean, every poll we've talked about shows that Americans have zero interest in getting further involved in Ukraine, have zero interest in writing a blank check for Israel. So I think the people are on our side. It's simply that Washington is bought and paid for by a bunch of special interest lobbies. And I think, what can people do if they're on our side? You need to contact your congressmen and your senators. You need to tell them politely but firmly, we do not support expanding these wars. And if enough of them hear that, well, the one thing they're most terrified of, Dr. Paul, is losing their jobs and losing all the goodies they get when they're in D.C. So I think at this point, that's the only thing we can do.
That's for sure. Now, I don't know whether we want to go ahead and talk about what's going on in Ukraine, but we might do that.
Yeah, sure.
I know you've been on and made comments on this subject for a long time, that if you look at the history and the internal politics of Ukraine, that it has revealed you know, a lot of people with high standards. And right now, the headline on Zero Hedge, you know, alerts us to, why, once again, how many dollars have we sent over there? You know, they give us these billions of dollars, but I don't think anybody knows. But all I know is stolen money. I think we just called it stolen money. What do you mean stolen money? Well, they steal it from the people, the poorest people in the country, this middle class and the poor, through the printing of money. So that is, I think, the big problem. But the corruption that they revealed today is that somebody in the administration, Zelensky's administration, corrupt Ukrainian official's son found lying in bed with huge sums of money, $6 million seized from medical fraud. Where somebody said, $6 million, that's peanuts these days. But they said over there, when you can do that in that poor country, and you're not on the gravy train of getting military money, they would say that this is a big deal and big corruption. It's out in the open. So maybe that'll soften the blind stand, you know, with Ukraine. But that means what does that mean? That you have to support Russia? No, support the United States. Stop supporting both of those countries and work hard to try to get along with both countries. People say, oh no, if you stop sending the money to Israel or Ukraine, that means you're supporting Russia or the Gaza people. So that is the reason that people get pressured. There's no doubt. And your distinction is very important. You know, the people, I think, are wiser than the government. But the big question is, why are we about to continue to do that process? It'll be interesting to see if we can't claim in November a little bit of improvement. But quite frankly, it's very difficult to take on all the people who have special interests in the money and thinking about military industrial complex, the pharmaceutical industry, all of this. That's a big job. But yes, we shouldn't forget about the American people. What we want to do is encourage them to speak out against these senseless wars.
Yeah, the official's name was Tetiana Krupa, and he was the medical examiner in Western Ukraine. He was responsible for giving out certificates for those they were trying to conscript forcibly into the military. And so basically it was a pay to play. That he would collect money from these people who did not want to go in the military and be blown up. And he would, you know, lay in bed with $6 million, because who wouldn't want to do that, right? So it turns out, I mean, this is, you probably missed out, Dr. Paul. You did the same thing in the Air Force. You could have had $6 million in your bed if you just charged for the right forms. But more seriously, so here's this guy. He's doing pretty well in a country where the average income is probably a couple $100 a month. So he had $6 million in cash and jewelry. Turns out he owns 30 properties, 9 luxury cars, and let's just say those aren't Audis. Those are a little higher than that. He owns a hotel and restaurant complex. He has properties in Austria, Spain, Turkey, and another 2.3 million in foreign banks. That's not bad for a country doctor, Dr. Paul, is it?
No, he's doing pretty well. You know, I had a mixed feeling when I was reading about this, that they would bribe the officials to avoid the draft. Well, avoiding the draft is good. That's slavery, you know. But the way they're doing it, though, with the corruption, makes it very difficult, you know, to really say, hey, this is really great. But it's sort of ironic that there are two wrongs out there. But I tell you what, I can understand the people that don't want to go to war. There's a family story in my family that thought that my grandfather lived in Germany, and he came here when he was 14 because he was trying to get away from the German draft way back, you know, 19th century. So this whole thing of getting out of the military draft, yes, we need to point that out, but the corruption is not what we can endorse.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we do have something special later, but before both of us close, I'm going to actually close with something that I just saw. It's kind of breaking news, which is Jeremy Lofredo. He's a journalist for the Gray Zone, which is, you know, Max Blumenthal and Aaron Maté. He's among 5 journalists who have been arrested and beaten by the Israeli authorities today as we speak. Their phones have been stolen. They reported that they've been beaten, and there's no word on their conditions. So should be a big concern with 5 or 6 American journalists getting beaten up in Israel. So I'll close with that, although we have a little something special afterward, but I'll turn it over to you to do your closing, Dr. Paul.
Well, good. And I want to, of course, thank all our viewers for tuning in and giving us support for our efforts. But Daniel has an announcement that he wants to make, and then we will close out the program. Daniel, what do you have?
Well, sir, this is a trailer from our good friends at the Mises Institute. They are premiering a film in just a couple days on October 11th. I will put a link in the description here to give you some more information about the film. But we would like to show the trailer because there are a few special people in this trailer. It's about the Fed. And there's someone who may or may not be in this building with us right now. So we're going to sign off and we're going to leave you with this trailer. And I will, when we finish, put a link in the description where you can watch this excellent, promising film about the Fed. So go, Turkan.
In the day's other news, the Federal Reserve.
No confidence out there.
Damage has already been done.
How do we fix the Fed?
Initially, the Fed was only supposed to be a lender of last resort.
And so the Fed said, we're going to set this minimum reserve requirement, and they realized that they could use that to cause the money supply to expand and contract. So this is just one extra tool that they have commandeered to influence the money supply in the U.S.
After World War II, and after all the nations of the world had gone off the gold standard, it was pretty chaotic.
The United States Treasury was running out of gold at that point during the 1960s. So in 71,
prices shot up stratospherically.
So then we got the huge inflation.
Now, who was the money printers? That was the Federal Reserve System.
They've taken on all of these new mandates. And in order to accomplish all of these goals that they've taken on, they've had to amass all of these new powers.
It is the most powerful and least understood institution in the country. It really is difficult to overstate how big this story is and how much it matters.
The Fed has always used emergencies to expand their powers.
This was a very bad day. It is going to fall on average people. They were late to the scene of this fire.
Now everybody's talking about a new currency in the world, and that's a big deal. It's going to come.
The Federal Reserve, as it exists today, has a ton of power, and it would just be magnified tenfold, 100-fold with a central bank digital currency.
And it's all based on lies, too, because people know the government's lying to them about inflation.